Health, Psychology, and Human Nature with André Sturesson. Hey friends, hope you're having a great day. Are you following me on Instagram and Facebook? Please go to Health, Psychology, and Human Nature on Instagram or Facebook, or both for that matter, to get the latest episodes, inspiration, and more. Please take a pause and go there. Also, if you like the episode, please share it with a friend, family member, or somebody else who you think might like it. Welcome to Health, Psychology, and Human Nature with André Sturesson, a science-focused podcast where we explore, learn, and improve our lives together. Do you lie often? In today's episode, you will learn everything you need to know about lies and lie detection. That probably was a lie. Okay. Good joke. Okay, so today you will learn how often we lie, why we lie, how good we are at telling if somebody else is lying, as well as technologies and techniques to find out if someone is lying or not. Erik Mac Giolla, he's an associate professor at the Department of Psychology in the University of Gothenburg, Sweden. And he has a broad interest in legal psychology. His primary research area is on deception detection and cues to deceit. Friends, I really hope you enjoy this interesting episode. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Happy to be here.
I think I'm going to start with, are you a good liar?
Am I a good liar? I'm probably not a bad liar because most of us seem to be quite good liars.
Yeah, and I think we will get into that a lot. We talked a little bit about that before. It seems like we're quite good at lying.
Yeah, or maybe a better way of phrasing it is that we're bad at detecting lies.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thank you for that. So I would like to ask you, how much do we lie? Do we know that from the literature?
Yeah, there's a few studies on it. So it seems like we lie about twice a day.
Twice a day?
Twice a day, on average. And then there's a few with what they call prolific liars, and they would lie a lot more than the average person then.
Right. Who are these prolific?
Yeah, who are the prolific liars? It's generally speaking, they're people who, if we go more from the personality literature, they're people who have who are high on narcissism and high on Machiavellianism, so high on what are called the Dark Triad traits.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. So those that lie more, their personality is a bit different, or
it would seem that, yeah. Okay. So, I guess the classic example is psychopaths. So psychopaths lie more than the average person, and if we think of psychopathy as a scale rather than as a in-out category, then the people who are closer or further up, closer to the psychopaths, they lie more.
Right, so it's a scale. So if you're more on the psychopath end, then you're more likely to lie more.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. What else did you say? So it's what was it that increased?
Well, there's this concept called the Dark Triad.
So the Dark Triad, what is that? What is the Dark Triad?
Yeah, it's 3 personality traits, which I guess you can see as negative or antisocial personality traits. So Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy.
All right. So if you're higher in these 3, then it's more likely that you're a liar then.
Yeah. Well, people who are higher in these traits, who are higher in the Dark Triad, they see people as instruments. So they're more willing to use them for their own gain. And in that sense, lying is a way to use people and to gain an advantage.
Right. That's interesting. And is the opposite also true? So if you're kind of the opposite of the 3, then you lie less, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So if you're lower on the Dark Triad scale, you're less likely to lie.
That is interesting. Okay, so do we also feel different when? Because I was also thinking, like, if you're high in the Dark Triad, then perhaps when you're lying, then you don't feel as bad when you're lying, and if you're lower down on the scale, then if you're lying, then probably it will produce a lot of negative emotions in you, such as anxiety and stuff. Is that also true, or?
That's a really interesting question, and drawing very broad strokes, it would seem that.
Yeah.
So, like, most people, lying is associated with negative emotions, and it would seem that people who are very high on the psychopathy scale or very high on the Dark Triad traits would feel less negative emotions when lying.
Interesting. I've even heard about the lying delight or something like that. Is there something called that as well, or?
Jupiter's delight.
Delight.
Yeah. It's a very, like, known concept. It comes from Paul Ekman, who has done a lot of research in lie detection. I don't actually know how much research there is on Jupiter's delight. He claims it's a pretty known phenomenon, but I haven't seen that many studies examining the concept.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that is something also I've been looking at, like a couple of TED Talks now before this our conversation, and in that they was talking about this concept in, I think, at least two of the different YouTube clips, so or the TED Talks.
Paul Ekman has without a doubt been the most influential researcher in deception detection, at least in terms of what the public would know about deception, but his research has been questioned a lot by more recent researchers in the field. So I'm not sure how valid it currently is.
Right. Interesting. It's always great to talk to somebody like yourself who actually, like, knows the literature from like a layperson in this field like myself. Then it's really hard to know what is true or not. So that's great. Thank you for that. So I'm also interested in like, are some people better at lying than others?
It would seem that way, but we don't really know who those people are. Like, it would make sense that the people who lie more are also better at better at lying. So again, these people who are higher on the Dark Triads or who have more psychopathic traits will be better liars. But there's just a real lack of research in that area right now. So we actually don't know who these good liars are or who these bad liars are.
Right.
I mean, we all have anecdotal experience. So my partner, for example, she is a terrible liar. She just can't keep a straight face. She goes bright red. But whether that actually holds and why that is the case, we don't really know.
Right. Do you believe that if she was like, you get $1 million if you can lie, do you think that she would be able to lie then in a good way?
Like, or the research would suggest that she can, and that I'd have or at the very least the research would suggest that I would have a difficult time detecting her lies, but my anecdotal experience would suggest that I would be able to detect it.
Right.
So I don't know.
You're quite certain that you will be able to.
But then they've done studies on exactly this, on partners trying to uncover their partners telling lies or truths, and seemingly we're no better than if we were to judge a stranger.
So okay, interesting. Cool. Is it also true that, or do we also, lie to ourselves?
Self-deception. Yeah, there's some people that claim we lie to ourselves.
Yeah.
It almost becomes a philosophical question. So if we look at the definition of a lie, the definition of a lie is that you try to make someone believe something that you believe is untrue. That's pretty much the definition of a lie.
It's quite a simple definition for being a definition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a simple definition, and it covers quite a lot of broad things. But just related to self-deception, then it becomes a bit paradoxical to convince yourself of something that you believe is untrue. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are other areas in social psychology that look at what they call self-enhancing biases, and they're kind of like ways of framing events or things to make yourself seem better than you are. And whether that is a self-deception or not, it becomes almost more of a definitional issue. So some people see that as a self-deception.
Right.
So there's, for example, a famous concept called the better than average effect, that the vast majority of people think they're better than average,
Right.
which they can't be, because then they wouldn't be. Yeah, someone has to,
someone has to be in the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody can't be like in the top percentile.
Well,
in the class.
just like by the definition of what we mean by average, half of the people have to be under the average, you know? So everyone can't be better than average. But whether the better than average effect is a self-deception, that you're lying to yourself, or whether it's just a bias, is almost more of a philosophical issue.
Yeah. But what was that called again before we talked about the better than average? You said something like
Self-enhancing.
Self-enhancing. What is that about?
Well, it's a way of I guess maintaining a healthy view of yourself. So maintaining like this rose-tinted view of yourself, as it's a way of maintaining your self-esteem, I guess, like an ego defensive system.
Right. Because that can really work both ways, I guess. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people who also think that they are less worth, or like they're more critical to themselves, that they or look more ugly or whatever than they actually do.
Yeah.
So interesting. I think this can work both ways.
There are absolutely some people that would see themselves as worse than average.
Yeah.
But it seems that most people don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So most people would see themselves as better than average, at least on the things that are important to them.
Right.
So
okay.
if you, for example, really pride yourself on your driving ability, then you're more than likely going to see yourself as better than average in terms of driving ability, even though you mightn't be.
That is very interesting. So if something is important to you, then you tend to think that you're better than you actually are.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that ties again back into this idea of it being important for your self-esteem. So
Right.
the things that are important to you are going to be central to your self-esteem. And in order to increase your self-esteem, you're therefore going to see yourself as better on these things.
Wow, that is interesting. Okay, so that is like something that we know, that if you think that something is important, then it's more likely that you actually think you're better.
On average, yeah.
Yeah, on average, cool. Is that what is that about? Is that like in different categories? Is that means driving? Can it also be?
We see it everywhere. So a colleague of mine has done research on how environmentally friendly people think they are.
Yeah.
And there we see the better than average effect. So most people think that they're more environmentally friendly than most people.
Right. That's interesting. So like, but also, so if environment is important to you, then you tend to think that you are more environmentally friendly than you actually are.
Exactly. And his research was done largely on students in Sweden, and I'm guessing most students in Sweden see themselves as quite environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
Like it's an important part of their identity.
Right. Is there some way that people can change this for the better or worse? Like become more realistic, or actually or let's say that you're quite critical of yourself, to actually perhaps improve of the way you're looking at yourself?
I'm really not sure. Like we're now into sort of, this seems to be a pretty stable bias, and biases are very hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
And they're very hard to like train yourself out of as well. So there's a lot of research on de-biasing, and one of the main ways seems to just to be aware of the bias. So if you're aware of this phenomenon, it might dampen the effect of it a little bit.
Okay, so if you're more aware of, what?
If you're more aware of the better than average effect,
yeah,
it should have less of an effect on you.
Right. is that good for somebody?
Well, it's ironically, it's probably bad for their self-esteem.
Yeah, exactly. So just forget about what we just said.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I saw a TED Talk, as I mentioned, with a researcher called Kang Lee.
Okay.
Have you heard about him?
No.
Okay. But he had done studies of children and tried to look at if children lie, when they start lying, and all these things. And what he basically said was that like when we are 2, he did experiments, and in his experiments, like when we were 2, children lied 20% of the time. When we were 3, I think it was 50% of the time, and when we were 4, we lied about the things in his experiment 80% of the time. Is that something you know of, like the developmental of the lying?
Yeah, I can't say that much about those exact percentages because I'm guessing that depends on the experimental setup.
Yeah, this was his experiments.
Yeah. In general, you can say that children start lying at quite a young age and their ability to lie gets better. So by the time of late childhood, early teenagers, they're lying pretty much as good as an adult.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is quite good, right?
Which is quite good. It's very good, yeah.
Right. But and what he also said was that this is like a part of the
developmental stages.
Exactly. Said it was the part of developmental stages. And so it's something that's very natural and something that we, like all of us, like all children do almost. Or all children.
It seems so. It seems that everyone lies. And if you claim you don't, you're either lying or you simply are unaware of how often you lie.
Exactly. It's a trick question. Do you lie often? Whatever you answer, you're...
yeah.
We know you're wrong. Okay, so it's like so lying, would you say that lying is a part of the normal developmental process?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say it's more you have to reach certain stages in your development in order to be able to lie.
Yeah.
So for example, a critical stage is theory of mind. Yeah. Understanding that other people actually have their own minds and their own thoughts.
Could we just elaborate a little bit on that for those that haven't heard about theory of mind before, just really shortly what it's about?
So like very young children, I have a 3-month-old at home, and very young children, they don't understand that there exists other, how should I call it? They have like a completely egocentric view of the world. Right. They don't understand that there exists other minds.
Right.
And this theory of mind, this doesn't start developing until about 2 to 3 years of age. So it's only around then that they start understanding that other people experience their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own emotions. And it's this understanding that is central to lying, since you're trying to influence someone's thoughts, feelings, or emotions. And if you don't understand that they exist, then you can't really lie either.
Right. So it's me understanding that I know things that you don't know.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's the opposite. Like if I don't have theory of mind, I believe that you know everything that I know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you have to have that in order to be able to lie.
So if we think back to our definition of lying, that I'm trying to create a false belief in you. If I don't understand that you actually have a separate mind or a separate consciousness from me, then the idea of me trying to create a false belief in you doesn't make much sense.
It's true. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, if you already know what I know, then it's no
then I can't lie to you. Yeah,
exactly. It's no point of me trying to persuade you into thinking something else, or
exactly.
Is there anything else that we need to be able to lie, like from like a young age?
Well, what we see is that the very young children, they're not very good at it, you know.
Right.
So they try to lie, but they're not particularly good at it. But as they get older, I guess from experience, from understanding what most people are looking for when they're trying to detect liars, you get better and you learn what to say, what not to say, how to act, how not to act. And like I said, this happens pretty quickly. So by late childhood, you're already seeing that children are pretty much as good as adults at lying.
Interesting. So when you see your children start lying, then you shouldn't think that you're going to become a pathological liar. Then you're more supposed to think perhaps this is like a normal step of human development.
Absolutely. So
you're
if anything, I'd be worried for a child that isn't able to lie.
Yeah, yeah. So when your children, how many children do you have?
Just one.
Okay, so when she will start to lie to you, you will become happy then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Finally. Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. So from the age when did you say, like late childhood, was it? From there on, then we're good at lying, like until we pass away, or
pretty
like
much, yeah.
So what is it that we lie about the most? Do we know that?
Yeah. So they've done diary studies where people are basically asked at the end of every day to try to remember what they lied about during the day.
Yeah.
And it's not that surprising. Most lies seem to be these simple, everyday white lies.
Yeah.
So like, is this a nice jumper? And if you don't agree, you're still quite likely to say, yes, it's a lovely jumper.
What do you think about my t-shirt, Erik?
It's a lovely t-shirt, Andrea.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So the most common lies are these simple everyday lies where lying is used as a social lubricant just to make things easier, make everyday interactions easier.
Right. I mean, that feels like these everyday white lies seem to be quite important to relationships, I imagine.
Absolutely. All sorts of relationships. They're important for family relationships. They're important for student-teacher relationships. They're important for friendships. Like, it's all sorts of relationships. These little white lies are central to it being a functional relationship.
Yeah, because like if everybody, like, so let's say that you're teaching something, and then the people listening will just go up and just say, I don't like your shoes. Then you will be probably, I mean, then your relationship wouldn't be as good.
Absolutely. Or the other way around. I often get questions in class that that mightn't be the most interesting, but you nonetheless say, wow, very interesting question.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and it's these little lies that, like, they're really like a fundamental part of society. You know, they're a fundamental part of our fabric in how we're meant to interact with people.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So so they are like social lubricant in a way.
Absolutely.
Would you say that? So that is by far the most common lies then. These little white lies. Like, how, if you would just estimate, what do you think? Like, how big is the percentage, or if there are studies on it?
Well, it seems to be that we, like I said at the start, that we lie about twice a day.
Yeah.
I think that sounds a bit low, if I have to be honest. I can imagine that we tell these white lies so automatically that we don't even remember them as lying.
True.
So when we then report it back in this diary at the end of the day, that we've simply forgotten how many lies we've actually said during the day.
Right.
But the best guess at the moment is about twice a day.
Right. Yeah, this way of doing studies these self-reports must have some problems with them because they are relying on memory, right?
Absolutely. And not only memory, they're also relying on, there's a problem called social desirability.
Yeah, exactly.
So people are more than likely not going to report the worst lies that they said because they don't want to come across as a bad person, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
And then, like you said, there's going to be a problem with memory. So they mightn't remember all the white lies because they were so trivial, they were so automatic, they were so easy to say that they weren't worth remembering.
Exactly. Right, yeah. Okay. So these are like some kind of lubricant. And like, what other types of lies are there?
There are more, of course, severe lies. So a suspect for a crime, a guilty suspect for a crime, might lie when they're claiming they're innocent. Or a partner who has cheated might lie when confronted with their infidelity. These would be much more serious types of lies.
Yeah. Do we know how much that we actually do those more serious kinds of lies?
This is a lot harder to estimate because you can't really use the diary studies in the same way. And there's, like I said, there's going to be huge problems with social desirability then.
Yeah,
because
sure.
people, of course, are going to be less willing to admit these. So we don't have a good estimate at the moment on how often people do these high-stake lies, as they're called.
True. But as you said, it's probably more likely if you're like, if somebody has cheated or if somebody has committed a crime and are like, perhaps will get like a sentence. So, yeah. And
there's a related area of research on secret keeping. So it's in the sense that a lie can also be an omission of information, so that you, rather than explicitly lying about something, you withhold information.
Right.
And in that sense, secret keeping can kind of be a lie. And research on secret keeping is fascinating. It shows that people really don't like keeping secrets, and the vast majority of people will tell at least one person about the secret that they're keeping.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't like to have our secrets at all.
No, there's some sort of like psychological burden, it seems, on secret keeping.
Yeah. So
and we then try to unload this on, like I said, at least one person.
Right. Yes, somebody who's close to you probably who won't.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, like the most important function in a way then seems to be this social lubricant then. Is that true, or for the white lies now?
For white lies, yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important functions.
Yeah.
And another way of thinking about lying in general is as a form of persuasion. So if we think of persuasion as an attempt to influence someone's behavior, then lying is one potential tool in your persuasion toolbox.
So if I want to convince somebody of something.
Exactly, yeah.
So people who work in sales.
People work in sales, yeah. But you don't have to lie in order to persuade. You can tell the truth to persuade someone as well. So there's several different tools in your persuasion toolbox, and lying is just one of these tools. So that's another really important function that lying fills in society.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the social theory or whatever, I don't know if there is actually like it has an official name, but I think that in a way seems very plausible. I mean, we are social animals, and if we can maintain our relationships in a good way, then that is good for ourselves and probably good for the group as well.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, we are social animals. All primates are social animals, and we've historically grown up in groups of people, and in order to maintain some sort of what would you call it, some sort of cohesion in the group, it's important that you don't go around hating each other all the time, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And these simple white lies are a way of avoiding those sorts of negative feelings between group members.
Exactly. So if we're going to go out for a hunt, or we're going to go out and gather stuff, or I don't know, build something or create a tool, it's better if we can cooperate than if we just tell each other like bad things that are true. Then that might not be as good for the cooperation.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anything else? So like if we like change from like an evolutionary perspective, is there anything else, or?
Do you mean, is there anything else from an evolutionary perspective?
To why we lie, or maybe I'll rephrase. So why do we lie from an evolutionary perspective?
Yeah, again, I think the simplest explanation is for the social reasons that we were already talking about, in order to maintain group cohesion. There's a few different theories. So there's one theory that claims we've developed the ability to lie in order to be able to gain advantage over people. These theories often then counter that by saying that we should therefore also have developed an ability to detect lies. But it seems that our ability to detect lies is so poor that the argument for us being able to lie as a way to control people mightn't actually be that strong. Rather, it seems that we've developed our ability to lie for this social reason, in order to maintain cohesion between groups. Or within groups, sorry.
Yeah, within groups, exactly. Yeah, all right, just see if I can get my head around that. So the theory is, that theory is that if I lie, then I can get ahead within the group. But as we are very bad at detecting...
Well, the original theory, they call it an evolutionary arms race.
Mm-hmm.
So as we develop our ability to lie, we should also be developing our ability to detect lies. And that these should constantly be developing in concordance with each other. But since we're so poor at detecting lies, I'm not sure if that theory actually holds. Rather, it seems like we've developed an ability to lie, possibly for some other reason than in order to gain advantage over people.
So it's more plausible that it is for this maintaining a social relationship.
Yeah, and I think a side effect of that is that lying can also be used in order to take advantage of people.
Yeah.
But that's like a negative consequence of something that's ultimately positive for humans.
Yeah.
This maintaining group cohesion.
Yeah.
And using lying as a social lubricant.
Right. There's also, I saw also like in one of these TED Talks that I think they said that the more intelligent the species, the more likely that we will lie. They said, I think it was something about having a bigger neocortex was associated with more lies. Is that something you have read something about, or?
Potentially, like there is research on deception in other animals than humans. Whether we can call those lies, I'm not so sure. It's definitely deceptive behavior, but whether it's lies in our definition of trying to create a false belief in another person, I'm not so sure. So they've done studies, for example, on gorillas that hide food from other gorillas in their group. And they then try to say that that's some form of deception. There's also research on gorillas. So before gorillas fight, they have like a face-off where they snarl at each other.
When they do what? Snarl?
Snarl. So they go like...
Put the teeth...
They bare their teeth.
Okay, yeah.
And when the submissive gorilla loses this face-off, they end up closing their lips. So they stop showing their teeth. And they found cases where the gorilla actually keeps on holding up their lips with their fingers in order to hide that they're actually being submissive.
Really?
Yeah. So in a way, that can also be seen as deception. So they are submissive to this other gorilla. They are accepting that they don't want to fight, but they don't want to show that, so they keep on lifting up their lip in order to show their teeth.
So they have this automatic response, and then they believe that if they just put their fingers up, then they will be able to...
Exactly. They'll be able to hide this automatic response.
Wow.
So that is a form of deception, I suppose, and possibly even a form of lying. Yeah. But it's quite different from what we think of when we think of lying.
Yeah, for sure. Does this ever work? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't know, actually. I
Maybe it does.
Maybe.
I mean, we are different as species. For me, as a human, it seems rather unlikely that, like, taking your finger and putting up your lip actually would work to deceive another, but perhaps it works. Who knows? Okay, so there are this deceptive behaviors in other species as well. Like, is there a lot, or?
Well, again, it depends how broad you want to be. So take a stick insect that uses camouflage to appear as a branch on a tree.
Right. What is a stick? Is there a way to explain that?
Yeah, a stick insect is just a small insect that kind of looks like a little twig.
Okay. Yeah.
They're common in rainforests.
Okay. Yeah.
And I guess you could see that as a form, you could see camouflage as a form of deceptive behavior. Right? So it's pretending to be a twig.
Yeah.
I think that's drawing the spectrum of deceptive behavior a little broad, because it's not really what we think of when we think of lying in an interpersonal interaction.
No, exactly. It doesn't feel that, like, intuitively, it doesn't really feel as a deception either. I mean, yeah, in a way, but I mean, it's not like the insect is doing it on purpose, kind of knowing.
Exactly. Yeah. And in terms of being able to verbalize, since other animals don't have the same language capacity as humans, they can't really lie in the same way, you know.
And also when we talk about the concept theory of mind, I mean, me knowing that you know, like, or no, me knowing that you don't know the same thing, so thinking that we,
yeah, exactly. And there may be, like, other primates can have some form of theory of mind, it seems. And that's why the deception in other primates is probably quite similar to human deception. So the gorilla holding up their lip, that's evidence of some form of theory of mind.
Yeah.
But again, it's pretty far away from what we intuitively think of when we think of lying.
Yeah. But that is quite interesting, because there are these different... I mean, this is the science, of course, of theory of mind, and we're trying to see if a different species has theory of mind by putting these dots like on their face, and there are probably other experiments as well. But does this theory of mind, does that correlate? So having theory of mind, does that correlate with more deceptive behavior within a species?
Like, potentially. I'm actually not sure. I'm really not sure on that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I have something else here on this.
It does seem plausible, though, that animals that have more theory of mind will also have more of a capacity to be able to use deception.
Yeah. It sounds plausible as it is, and also what you talked about before, also like gaining the skill of lying. Like, perhaps different species have like a bigger array of skills that can be used for these deceptive behaviors, or if you want to call them lies, and like sort of lies, perhaps. So maybe like theory of mind is one component, and maybe the skills is one component, perhaps.
Yeah.
Right. So you talked about earlier about us not being so good at seeing if somebody else is lying or not. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So they've researched this idea for maybe 100 years or so. And the basic setup is that you either interact with someone face to face, or you see a video clip of someone, and you simply have to determine if this person is lying or not. And chance level is about 50%. So if you flip a coin and just totally guess if this person is lying, you'll be correct about 50% of the time. And it seems, on average, we're correct about 54% of the time, which isn't much better than chance.
Right. Exactly. Just so that everybody starts it. So, like, if you would just guess without even seeing the pictures, then you will get 50%. Yeah. If you do like enough of the pictures. So if we can actually choose instead of just not seeing the pictures, then we are only 4% better.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting is this ability, or lack of ability, seems pretty stable across everyone. So it seems we're all really bad at detecting lies, whether you're just an average Joe, whether you're a policeman, whether you're a judge. So even if you're explicitly working with trying to uncover deception, you're not any better than the average person.
That is interesting and scary.
Yeah, it is a little scary.
No, because I mean, if you're working as a lawyer or perhaps working as a police officer, then the skill of being able to tell if somebody's lying or not seems quite important.
Yeah, I guess it is if you think of it in the sense that you're trying to discover if this suspect is guilty in the interviewing room. But at the same time, most good police work will use evidence to determine if someone is guilty rather than what they say in an interview room.
True.
Or at least I hope they do.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so it's only 54%. What does that tell us? So that tells us again that we're just not good at detecting lies. Why do you think we're not good at that?
Well, again, I think it fits in with the idea of lying as a function to maintain social cohesion or to maintain group cohesion. So if we could detect people lying all the time, we probably wouldn't be able to maintain relationships with them, you know?
Yeah.
Because all these little white lies would suddenly be uncovered in the moment they're being spoken.
Yeah.
So when someone says, that's a nice jumper you're wearing, you'll instantly know if they're telling the truth or not. And if they're not telling the truth, it mightn't be the nicest feeling, you know?
Yeah, true. And so it's almost like if that would work, it's almost like if we would have mind reading capability. Like
absolutely.
Really, like I can really see your actual thoughts and your actual intentions and your actual, everything. Yeah, that.
And when you tell people that on average, we're really not very good at detecting lies, this 54%, most people are quite surprised. But if you actually think about it, like historically, it's not that strange. Like every major religion, every major society throughout history has put sanctions on lying. Thou shalt not lie.
Yeah.
And the reason is because we can't uncover them. If we could uncover them, you wouldn't need a sanction for it.
It wouldn't be a problem then.
It wouldn't be a problem.
No. You're right. Yeah, so we're really bad at detecting lies. And when you think about it, if I just think about myself, then I think it's not that often that I probably can detect if somebody's lying or not, probably.
Yeah, and that's like there was a lovely simple study done where they asked people two questions. The first was, recall the last time you found out someone was lying to you. And the second question was, how did you discover someone was lying to you?
Yeah.
And the vast majority of cases, people uncover that someone was lying to them either by external evidence, because the person told them they were lying, or because someone else told them they were lying.
Right. So it's either like finding some underwear somewhere in your apartment, or the person actually telling you, or somebody else telling you, like a friend or something.
Yeah. So it seems like it's really rare that we uncover lying in the moment that it actually happens.
Which also perhaps explains these behaviors that we have where we are trying to figure out if somebody is cheating on us or not. I mean, if somebody's cheating on us or not, then the person might like ask and, like even look at the phone, because it's so hard to tell.
Exactly. So like when you think about it a bit more, it suddenly makes a lot of sense that we can't detect lies, you know?
Yeah. So not being able to see if somebody's cheating is good for the social relationship. Not really, of course.
Well,
no, it's good for maybe in that respect it's not the best thing.
Maybe not in that example, no.
Yeah, no. Okay. All right. And I was also thinking about these different technologies. No, I have one more thing before we get on to the next subject. Because when I was looking at one of these TED Talks again, there was this TED Talks got like 20 million views or something. And it was a person who had written a book about Liespotting, I think it was called. where she said that there are these educated people who used science to be able to predict if somebody's lying or not. And she said that they were able to find out if somebody was lying like 90% using speech and body language and everything else. What do you think about that?
That's just not true.
It's not true. Okay.
No.
Tell me more.
Then we're into like the area of what we call cues to deception.
Yeah.
So a valid cue is a cue that reliably distinguishes a true teller from a liar.
Yeah.
So the classic example is Pinocchio's nose.
Yeah.
When Pinocchio lies, his nose gets bigger and we therefore know he's lied. The thing is, there is no Pinocchio's nose. There's no single cue or behavior that is uniquely associated with lying. And what we actually find is that the cues are so undiagnostic that we don't know if there are any reliable cues to deceit at all. So after 100 years of research, we still haven't managed to find any single reliable cue to deception. Our best bet is that true statements might be a little more detailed and that true tellers might be a little more cooperative in an interview setting compared to a liar. But that's not that much information to go on really, because there's still going to be a huge overlap. It's not like every true statement is going to be more detailed than every false statement, because context is going to play a huge role and your ability to lie is going to play a huge role. So if there's no cues to deceit, if there's no reliable cues to deceit, then there isn't really anything for you to look for when you're trying to distinguish between this truth teller and this liar. So I'd be very skeptical to the claim that there are people who can do this.
Okay. So there are the best ones are there are almost none, but if the best cues that seem to be perhaps working is if you give more detail,
how detailed the statement is,
yeah,
and how cooperative the person is. But again, these aren't very diagnostic and they're not going to bring you up much more than the 54% accuracy rate that we get just by
chance.
Well, a little more than chance.
Yeah. Okay. So there are no way of in interpersonal communication to become a good lie spotter.
Yeah. So things like what people typically assume, like nervous twitching or looking up to the left or not maintaining eye contact or touching your face, none of these things seem to be associated or seem to be a valid cue of deception.
Right. Okay, so we are bad at lie spotting. We're
real bad, and this again fits. If there were valid cues to deception, we'd probably be better at detecting lies. So again, if we go from the perspective that lying is important for maintaining social cohesion, that if we could detect lies, this would undermine the value of lying for social cohesion, then this again fits with the idea that there aren't valid cues to deception.
Right. But even if you're really trained by the best undercover FBI, CIA, whatever, still there's a little bit of research that training might improve it, but I'm quite skeptical to that research because again, it assumes that there are valid cues to deceit. Yeah. Okay. What about technologies then? I mean, we have all these fancy MRI, fMRI scans, eye detecting cameras, everything. Is there any technologies that work when it comes to see if somebody's lying or not?
Yeah, time will tell. Right now, I think the best thing we have is still the classic polygraph.
Okay.
When you hook people up with their fingertips and a respiratory measure, and this has been around since the early 1900s, so the polygraph isn't very new. The criticism with the polygraph is that it's not actually measuring deception. What it's measuring is arousal.
Yeah.
So it's measuring how much you're sweating. It's measuring pulse. It's measuring how strongly you're breathing. And arousal isn't a perfect correlate of deception. So sometimes an innocent person will be very aroused even when they're telling the truth.
Perhaps if you're more neurotic.
If you're more neurotic, absolutely, yeah. Or if you're just worried about the outcome. If you're worried that the person won't believe you, even though you're telling the truth, you might be very nervous. And this is then going to show up in a polygraph test. So a polygraph has a really high risk of what you call a false positive, that you identify someone as lying, but they're actually telling the truth.
Right, it's the feeling when you get when you go through the security in like airplane, or somebody's checking your passport, even though you have a 100% valid passport. I at least feel my pulse goes up, being interrogated.
I don't think you're alone. Or when you get the question when you arrive in a new country, why are you here? Yeah. And you're kind of like, I'm here for a conference, and then they ask what hotel you're staying at, and it's like, I can't remember, and like. You get really nervous, even though you're being perfectly honest.
Yeah.
So that's the downside of the polygraph. Studies show that you might get up to somewhere around 70% accuracy with the polygraph test, which is better than chance, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's still a huge margin of error there.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you're using it for, of course, but it's far from perfect.
Yeah, okay. But so 70% of the time, it actually gets the result right.
It would seem so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's not the best to use in an actual system, I guess. Like,
no, if we're talking...
put in you're in a room, like, use this machine, and then, there's a 30% chance that we will actually get this wrong, and you get a life sentence.
Yeah, so if we're talking beyond reasonable doubt, like the results of a polygraph are nowhere near what I think the average person would think of when they think of beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah. How much, like what percentage would you need to be able to actually use such a technology, like in
I'm going to let the lawyers answer that question.
Pass. I'll say pass on that one. Okay, cool. I was also seeing some other stuff. Also, I don't know if you heard about this. I will just check with you. Also, this researcher, he had done something called transdermal optical imaging, which was supposed to be able to sense the blood flow in your face. And what he said in this TED Talk again was that when you're lying, you can't tell if somebody's lying by the face, but the autonomic nervous system will pump up blood into your face. So this was a technique to be able to see if you're actually having more blood in your face or not. And I think he said that he got, I don't know, I think he even said like 70 or 80% something and this was again with the kids, like using it at kids to see if the kids were lying or not. Have you heard about that?
I'm not that specific study. There is some research measuring body temperature, for example.
Yeah.
And again, they use the same argument that you just gave. As we lie, there's meant to be more blood flow, which increases temperature. This again, though, ties into the idea that you're actually measuring arousal rather than lying.
Right.
And replications of that study haven't come up to the same levels of accuracy as the original study. So again, I can't see that approach being much better than the classic polygraph.
Okay. So it's the polygraph is still like, that is the most evidence-based lie detector test. I mean, it's been most research on that.
Yeah, it's the most research, and it's the most popular, and it's the most widely used, but I still wouldn't use it myself.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Like, hypothetically, what would be the best, like, if we can look into the future, 50 years, what would be, you think, where would you place your bet of a technology that actually would be able to tell if somebody's lying or not?
That's a really interesting question. There's some current work going on right now with there, like you mentioned, fMRI research. I'm a little more skeptical to that because I think it assumes that lying is this single thing, this single phenomenon that's just going to appear somewhere in the brain. And I think lying's much more complex than that. Lying is like this integral part of our communicative system, so that it's just one single thing that's going to pop up every time we lie. I'm not so sure. There's also stuff looking at body capture things. So people are wearing like full body suits and they're trying to measure how you move. I'm a little skeptical there again. We'll see. I might be wrong. There's big data approaches. So, I mean, if you think of your spam filter in your email, that's a form of a lie detector, and it does a pretty decent job at detecting spam most of the time. But that's like purely driven on this iterative machine learning big data system. If we can get anywhere in the like face-to-face interaction, develop some sort of method of detecting lies there, I'm not so sure. Time will tell, but
I didn't really understand that, the big data thing. Like, is that only for things you using it with the computer, or using big data to actually see if somebody's lying in real life? Or,
well, I guess if we, in like a terribly dystopian future where George Orwell's worst nightmares have been imagined, and we have huge amount of data on each individual person's statements and behaviors, we might be able to use that data in order to predict when they're...
Okay, now I get it.
I hope we'll never come to that point, but like, it's not unimaginable if you think of how much information is constantly being stored about us every day, you know?
Yeah. It's just, everything is happening so fast that it's hard to imagine where we will be in 100 years, right?
Absolutely. Which
is scaring and fascinating, I think, at the same time. Yeah.
What we're researching on here is not so much technologies, but more interviewing methods in order to uncover deception. So one of the methods developed here in Gothenburg University is called the strategic use of evidence technique.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic idea is that if you have information or evidence on this person, and you're then interviewing them to see if they're guilty or innocent, say, of a crime, if you withhold that evidence and get them to answer an open question related to that evidence, what you find is, so as an example, let's say a book has been stolen from a nearby bookshop, and I know that I have CCTV footage of you being in that bookshop and touching the book, but I've no CCTV footage of you actually stealing the book. If I then interview you about this event, I might ask, so, Andrea, what have you been up to today? And if you're an innocent suspect, you're much more likely to tell me that you were in this bookshop and that you looked at this book. But if you're guilty, you're much more likely to avoid this critical piece of information. So you might say that you were in a different book, or that you weren't in a bookshop at all, or that you were in a restaurant. So you create these, the guilty suspects are more likely to create these statement evidence inconsistencies. And that seems to be quite a good way to detect lies.
Right. So if I'm actually guilty, I will just get the story, like get me away from the story as far as possible.
Exactly, because you don't know I have this evidence.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the important point.
Yeah,
you have
sorry.
evidence.
Yeah.
No, but you said that. It's just me. Okay, so so there's evidence, and then you ask questions related to the evidence. And if somebody says that, yeah, I was there and I looked at the book, and then it's much more likely that the person is telling the truth.
Yeah.
How is there any numbers on this?
And accuracy rates?
Yeah, exactly. Something like that, or?
Yeah, it seems to increase accuracy rates by about 20%. So if we think of 54% as the baseline for what the average ability is, we're up to kind of like 74% through the strategic use of evidence.
What if you use that and you also
Use the polygraph?
Yeah. maybe. No studies of that yet, perhaps. No. Just a tip for you guys. All right. Yeah. Okay. Is there any? Is that the best evidence-based method of seeing if somebody's lying or not? Is there others?
You're putting me on the spot here to say something about my former supervisor's work. It's definitely one of the best ways that we currently have at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, it's dependent on the context. It's dependent that you have evidence on this person and that person doesn't know you have evidence on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a very specific context.
Yeah. Can be used in certain cases.
Yeah. And again, like I think the influence on context on deception is one of the reasons why it's so different, why it's so difficult. Like in some situations, you're going to be more nervous lying than telling the truth.
Yeah.
In other situations, you're going to be more nervous telling the truth than lying.
Yeah.
So for example, or maybe not more nervous, but it's easier to lie versus telling the truth. So back to the I like your jumper example. It's much easier to lie there. It's just an intuitive, automatic response. But to actually tell the truth that I don't really like that jumper, it's quite a hard thing to do, you know?
Yeah, really hard.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's almost like it's almost like this, you see something that resembles a snake on the ground, and then you jump, and then like a couple of 50 milliseconds or something later, then you realize, it wasn't, I jumped but it wasn't a snake. Perhaps it's the same thing with lying, that it's like this,
it just
the brain
happens.
just creates this automatic response. And
absolutely, yeah.
Would you say, is that the case? Like
it's the case for common everyday lies and for rehearsed lies. So one of the findings is that if you rehearse your lie, it's harder to detect you.
Yeah.
So you're a better liar if you practice on the lie you're going to give.
Right. That is interesting. So it's like, because also on this, on the children, that it's a natural part of development, and also that it seems to be like a natural automatic response. It really seems to be quite ingrained in us, this lying. Like it really feels like something that is really human.
Yeah, and if there is an evolutionary explanation for it related to this idea of social cohesion or group cohesion, then it would make sense that it would become such an automatic human ability.
Right, for sure. I think we really I'm really happy for this conversation. It's been really interesting. Is there anything else that you would like to mention about lying, or something that I've missed?
Yeah, I may as well mention the micro expressions.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Just
what is it for?
Well, I don't know if you've seen the show Lie to Me with Tim Roth.
I actually haven't.
You haven't?
I'm not a big TV, but I don't watch a lot of TV.
I don't watch it either, so don't worry. But basically, it's again built on Paul Ekman's research.
Yeah.
And he has claimed that you can identify liars by what he calls micro expressions. And micro expressions are these fleeting, momentary movements in the face. The thing is, there's no research backing this claim up.
At all?
At all.
Okay.
Paul Ekman claims to have research about it, but it's not been made publicly available. So, and then attempts at identifying these micro expressions haven't been very successful either. So I just wanted to get that out on the table, that don't believe what you see and lie to me.
Yeah. Don't believe the microexpression theory. It's false. Is that right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, great. It's really been an honor. I've really enjoyed the conversation. So big thank you for coming on and talking with us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
All right. Take care. A rating and a review is a great thing. But if you will start to subscribe, you will make my heart sing. Have a great one, friends.